So it's a real pleasure to be here. I recognize so many of you, a lot of friends. A few of you I know are probably here to heckle. I'd like for you to wait till the end before you heckle. Let me at least get through my remarks. But a lot of people I've known for many, many years. Dave, we've done so many things together. Father Gene, a lot of things together. The Sherman, just so many. Dick, Susan Ferguson. So great to see so many friends. Here's what we're going to do. If you notice what I have as the title for the remarks, kind of policies that impact Ohio's next generation. I'm going to do 4 topics. The first topic is on academic standards and curriculum rigor. So a lot of people argue today, school is not like it was when I went to school. I've heard more than a few people talk about. When I went, I had to walk 20 miles. We had, chemistry 8 hours a day. This very rigorous curriculum that all of us went through. And of course, now the kids just kind of go and don't do anything. So what I'm going to do is actually show you how we, from a curriculum standpoint, where we are. Then I'm going to talk a little bit about vouchers and school choice. That's a really hot topic. The state of Ohio has $1 billion in that. So we're going to talk a little bit about how we got through that. Then I'm going to talk a little bit about intellectual capital. And finally, I'm going to talk about policy. What happens if President Trump is successful in completely eliminating the U.S. Department of Education? What functions have to be at the federal level? So those are the 4 things. I'm going to go through them pretty quickly, and then we can have time to interact. First one's on curriculum. Now you get a history lesson. Ready? When I started to teach, when my wife Carol, raise your hand, Carol. This is my wife Carol. I met Carol 55 years ago. It took her 54 years to accept my invitation to marry me. But that's not bad, right? A lot of considerations she had to take into account. When I first started teaching, we had what we called curriculum guides. Every school district, there are about 600 school districts in the state of Ohio. Every school district had a different curriculum guide, and you would serve on a curriculum committee. So I served actually on the curriculum committee. And what you do is you decide what is it that our students here in Centerville are going to learn? What is it our students in Oakwood are going to learn? And so the Centerville people would actually get the curriculum guide from Oakwood. What's Oakwood teaching their kids? And that's how you kind of figure out what you're teaching. Understand, before curriculum guides, the teacher would just get some books and teach whatever they wanted to teach. Then we came along with these curriculum guides, so all the teachers in the school district are basically teaching the same thing. Now, in a society where nobody moves, that works, right? So if you're born in Centerville, you spend your life in Centerville, you die in Centerville, I suppose it works. But now what happens if people start moving around? So back about 1990, we had a couple presidents, President Bush and then President Clinton. They said, here's what I think we need to do. We need to have academic standards. And the states ought to engage in this process of setting the standards. So all the states began to create standards. And you could go in and people published who had the toughest standards, who had the easiest standards in English, in math. So if you wanted to have an easy math curriculum, you might move to Oklahoma. You want to have a tough English curriculum, it might move to Massachusetts. Then President Bush W. comes along, and he goes down to Middletown, Hamilton, Ohio, and what does he do there? He signs some legislation. Anybody remember what that legislation? This is a big deal. It was called what? No Child Left Behind. Now, with No Child Left Behind, what happens? With No Child Left Behind, they said, what we're going to do is we're going to actually make sure everybody can read, and we're going to test everybody, and we're going to ensure proficiency. But the only way they got that signed was for all the states to be able to define what proficiency meant. So every state set their own proficiency standards. And there was actually an interactive map that you could go to that would show if I'm living in Illinois and I can't be reading proficient, then you could move to Kansas because you would be there. All right? Once again, does this sound like a logical way for a country to operate? Right? So no child left behind. And they did that because the only way the governors and others would sign off is if this individual states would be allowed to set their standard, their own standards and their own proficiency rates. Part of the reason for that is everybody knew that one or two states were going to be at the top of the heap. Who was going to be at the top of the heap? Massachusetts. Massachusetts. They were going to be at the top of the heap. And everybody was like, and Mississippi was going to be down here. Alabama was going to be here. And so what they said was that, let us figure out what proficiency is. And so Mississippi defined proficiency here. Massachusetts defined proficiency here. And their kids, Mississippi would say, 80% of our kids are reading proficient. But unless they move to Massachusetts, then they've got a problem. Okay, does this, you see what's happening here? About 2010, the Gates Foundation and others said, this is absolutely crazy in a mobile society. It's absolutely crazy. We need to have common standards across the 50 states. And so they came up with a new idea called the Common Core. Now, here's what you probably don't know. The Common Core, actually, people loved the Common Core initially. They loved it. They thought it was a great idea. But there was a single action by a president that doomed it. In 2010, we had a president, President Obama. He said, I'm going to give money to the states. It's called Race to the Top. And the only way you're going to be able to access the dollars is if you embrace the Common Core. Immediately, Republicans said, this is a terrible idea to have the Common Core. They fought against it. It became a political document, not an educational document. And so states, even though at that time 47 states had signed on to the Common Core, 47 of the 50 states had said, we'll embrace it. As soon as Race to the Top was initiated, the states started to drop out. Ohio was one of those states. Peggy Lehner, some of you know Peggy. Peggy and I were over here at Centerville High School, and we were trying to convince people to embrace the Common Core, that it was not a political document. There were hundreds of people there, and I can tell you, there were people yelling at us. It is. This is a conspiracy on the part of the federal government to try to mandate what our kids are going to learn. So the Common Core began to drop away. Now all the states went back to kind of defining their own standards, and that is where we are today. That's where we are. So all the states have their own standards. They have their own testing protocols. And I've written a number of op-eds on this. There was one group of people who always supported, when I would write an op-ed, and I had them in the Plain Dealer and the Dispatch and a number of newspapers, when I would write those op-eds, there was one group of people who always sent me a note and said, we love what you're saying about the Common Core. And that group of people was from the military. The military loved the idea of the Common Core. Doesn't it make sense? They're moving from Fort X to this base, to that base. Every time they'd move, their child would say, I've already had that. No, I haven't had that. No, I can't do this. Yes, I can do this. So the military people thought the Common Core, at least all those who contacted me, they thought it was just a terrific idea. We have all these different standards. We have redefined what it takes to graduate from high school. When I went to high school, you had to have 16 credits. 16 Carnegie credits. Now you need 20 credits, 21 credits. You have to demonstrate other things. You have to pass certain end of course exams. A lot of things now that a young person has to do that none of us had to do when we graduated from high school. But we're still dependent now on each state kind of operationally defining that. All right, that's from a curriculum stand. That's where we're at. I don't think we'll ever get back to the Common Core, at least not with the kind of political dynamics that we have right now. All right, that's the first topic. Topic number 2, vouchers. Ohio has become very, very enamored of vouchers. We had $600 million in vouchers. We had this last legislature put in another $300 million. Almost $1 billion goes into vouchers. Now, there are a couple things that I'm going to share with you. First, a real quick history lesson. Vouchers have gone through 3 waves. They first began to be used in 1954. Now, I'm not going to ask you questions on this, but some of you are going to know something that happened. There was a big court decision in 1954. Huge court decision. Changed the landscape of the United States. The Brown decision. That Brown decision, a lot of states said we embrace it, but the southern states, Mississippi, North Carolina, Arkansas, Alabama, some of the Virginias, the Carolinas, they were like, we're not doing that. And so the first wave of vouchers emerged through a thing called state grants. And those states gave grants to people, primarily white, to create their own academies within their states. Who went to those academies? White children. Who did not get access to those academies? Black children. Some states were tough on this, so tough that the public schools, and I gave you an article on this, they just closed completely. They said, we're not going to operate anymore. Prince Edward, I put this in your handout so you can read it. They shut down completely for years. If we can't educate the way we want to, we're just going to shut down. And they did. The white children went to their what? Academies. The black children, they just had to figure it out. This worked until about 10 years or so, and you'll see the court case. I put it in there so you could look at it. The court case, very famous court case, after the Brown decision. You'll see that the Runyon case versus McCrary, they said to the private schools, these academies, you cannot discriminate on the basis of race anymore. You can't do that. And you see that was 1976, so it took about 20 years after Brown. You can't do it. Now, people being very creative, they said, well, we'll come up with another way of doing this. And so 2 guys, Chubb and Moe, sounds like a comedy group. Chubb and Moe, they said, well, private schools are actually better. And so what we think we ought to do is create funds for people so that they can use those dollars to go to a better school than they're actually in right now. And so the first wave of private school, of voucher schools, were based on race. The second one were based on this kind of competition concept. And you saw people moving to these schools based on what they thought was a better school than their public school. That worked just the way in which the academies worked. You had white children exercising that option, black children not exercising the option, until with Runyon, the court said you cannot discriminate based on race. You cannot discriminate based on race. That means to those white academies, you've got to admit a white child or black child if that child applies. Well, once again, it sort of worked, but it didn't work. And so more court cases occurred. And in 2002, a court case right here in the state of Ohio, the Zellman decision, Susan Zellman went to the Supreme Court and they said, now you can still use that voucher, but you can use that voucher to go to a Catholic school, a religious school. Now, by the way, in that second wave, I wanted to mention this to you. In the second wave, where you saw them picking the better schools, that was the way in which they were really trying to get people to exercise choice and use the voucher. Dayton, Ohio was one of the stellar communities. It was Milwaukee, Washington, D.C., Dayton, Ohio. Parents advocating choice in education, PACE. And the final board chair for PACE, is standing in front of you. We closed it down in 2016. I went back and looked at my emails to find out when the last action occurred on PACE. It was formed here in Dayton. The Brookings Institution just published a piece highlighting the work that occurred in Milwaukee, Washington, D.C., and Dayton. Once again, the whole idea there was using dollars to get the young people to be able to pick a better educational option than the one that was before them. I was kind of supportive of that because I felt like if a young person on the west side of Dayton is going to a very, very dysfunctional school, they ought to be able to take a voucher and find a better school to go to. So I supported that. And that seemed to have a lot of people. I supported it. I thought it was, I think this gives that kid a chance. Well, with Zelman, and once they opened up the Catholic schools, the religious schools, all the other different kinds of schools that are operating, what happened was, at this point, they said, you can take that voucher, but we're now going to give it to anyone. Anybody can use it. So Centerville, we have lots of people. A couple years ago, there were 47 kids in Centerville who used vouchers. Last year, there were almost 1,000. Almost 1,000 in Centerville. Why? Did we open up a lot more seats? Are there 1,000 more private Catholic school seats in Centerville? No. What they did was they gave money to to parents who are already sending their kids to Catholic school. They said, you can use this money. We're incentivizing private schools. And that's how they began to develop that. So there are three ways of voucher usage. The first one was trying to escape the whole notion of having the kids integrated. Second wave was, can we put kids in better schools? And the third one was, we're going to now make vouchers available to everybody. Yeah, everybody gets them. Remember, that second wave was just a selective group. Third wave, everybody gets eligibility to them. By the way, in some states, for example, Florida, every parent, there's no income limit. You can make $1 billion and you're eligible for the voucher to send your kid to another school. Ohio has some income eligibility requirements. I can't remember what the cap is. It's $200,000, $300,000, $400,000 before you can't receive any voucher. But it's a significant family income before that occurs. So that's school choice. The one missing link, the thing that I've fought on, is accountability. I've always felt that if you're going to have school choice, there needs to be very good accountability systems in place. The accountability in the state of Ohio has not been our strong suit, although we're better than what we were. There are websites. If you put in St. Charles, if you put in a school, now you can go in and see the performance of those kids. Unfortunately, it's not the same accountability as a public school, different between the two schools, but we are getting closer to having good accountability for all the schools. I've testified on a couple of occasions. I've testified against the vouchers because I said the only way I would support it is if a private school that's receiving a voucher administers tests and assesses the students in exactly the way a public school does. To me, that was fair. A parent could now say, okay, my child's got a choice between this school, a public school, here's the performance of the kids in this school. This private school, here's the performance of the kids in this private school. I'm comparing apples to apples. And I opposed it when it was apples to oranges. The public schools had to administer all these assessments. The private school could just say, we're private, not knowing whether or not it was providing a good quality education. All right, that's school choice. You notice how I'm moving through these, folks. I know you want me to get through here, so I'm moving through these. Intellectual capital, the third one. In 2008, we had a thing called the birth dearth. The birth dearth was the result of the stock market, a whole bunch of other factors. People just stopped having babies. And we are now experiencing the impact of the birth dearth. And so the universities, doesn't matter which one it is. Today, did you notice the piece on the right-hand side of the Dayton Daily News on enrollments? It showed the enrollment at Wright State, Miami, showed what the enrollments look like. Those enrollments are being impacted by the birth dearth. Now, they're also being impacted by a couple of other things. I always was taught that a college education, there was a real return on investment with the college education. Suddenly, a lot of parents are beginning to say, is there really that return on investment with a college education? Now, they're doing that for a couple of reasons. When all of us went to college, we were looking for that day when graduation occurred and we got this thing called a diploma. Remember that? I went to The Ohio State University. I got 3 diplomas. And many people took those diplomas, framed them, put them up on their wall. In fact, when you go to a lot of doctors' offices, what do you see? You see, here it is. I went to this institution, that institution. Now, I don't know about you, but sometimes I kind of evaluate. So if I look at it and they go, it's a surgeon and he went to Phoenix Online University, I'm going, I'm not sure. I'm not sure that's the guy I want or that's the woman I want operating on me. I see that they went to a reputable, high-end medical school. I go, oh, I feel a little bit better about that. It's a signal to you. A degree is a signal. You've done certain things. You've completed certain requirements. Well, a couple of years ago, people began to question whether the signal was the right way to assess whether a student had what they needed in order to be successful. And they started to use what they called a human capital model. What do you actually know how to do? What can you actually do? If it's keyboarding, do you know how to keyboard and how quickly can you keyboard? If it's software, can you code? What else can you do? And we started having people hired just based on what they could do. Whereas when I applied for a job, it said what? Bachelor's degree required. Pennsylvania Governor Shapiro, he passed legislation that said you don't have to have degrees anymore for the jobs. They just took it completely out. We're going to rely completely on a human capital approach to this. And so we've had this switch. The universities are now not only dealing with the birth dearth problem, but they're dealing with the signaling problem. Because a lot of employers are saying, I don't really care if you have the degree. I just want to know if you can do A, B, C, and D. That's all I care about. And so there's this emphasis on the human capital. Now, still, degrees are important. All the states, there are places that monitor the amount of intellectual capital that are in each state. The state with the most intellectual capital in the United States is Massachusetts. You guys are quick. Massachusetts. That's the number one state in the country. Most intellectual capital. The county in the state of Ohio with the most intellectual capital is Delaware County. Delaware County has about 70% of the 25 to 65-year-olds in Delaware County have a college degree. Think about that, 70%. Holmes County has the lowest amount. Holmes County, everybody know where Holmes County is? It's up middle part of the state. 14.1% in Holmes County. So here's Delaware, 70%. Holmes County, 14.1%. Now here's the question. Which county has the highest per cap family income, average family income? Delaware. Delaware, the average family income is something like $102,000. Holmes County, it's something like $38,000. So the same thing is happening with states. And the reason this becomes important is because next generation employers are saying, how much intellectual capital do you have? So when Amazon, you probably don't know this, but Amazon, they located just recently, did you notice this? They just are going to have relocate some of their operations up in the Troy area, but they were actually looking at Dayton. And about 4 years ago, 5 years ago, Dayton was one of their sites. And I was asked to put together an assessment of the amount of intellectual capital we had in our region. And they determined we didn't have enough. There was not enough here. They weren't going to be able to fill the job. They were going to move everybody here to fill the jobs that they had. So they were like, yeah, I think we need to locate someplace else where there's enough intellectual capital. This becomes very important for communities to consider. How much do you have? And how are you trying to create opportunities so that young people can be successful at securing the intellectual capital that they need for success? So my point here is we've got changes occurring in our country right now. We're moving from a signaling to a human capital model. That's reducing our college enrollments. And we have the birth dearth, fewer students going to college, fewer students graduating from high school. That's lowering college enrollments. And those kinds of factors are impacting the amount of human capital, intellectual capital that we have in our community. That's the third one. Now, the fourth one, I'm going to come to this policy issue with the U.S. Department of Education. Let me just say, I've been asked on a number of occasions, I did a couple of television interviews on this, should the U.S. Department of Education be dissolved? Should they get rid of it? And I'm against that. I'm against that. There are certain things. Is the U.S. Department of Education probably bigger than it needs to be? Yes. Is Sinclair probably bigger than it needs to be? I'll bet you could have a good discussion around that. Right, David?
No.
The answer is no, but you could find people who would argue. Is University of Dayton, is any company. I was in a discussion with the president of one of our companies, CEO of one of our companies one day, and he was talking about the amount of waste in schools. The budget, for example, in the Dayton City schools is $500 million. How many companies in Dayton are $500 million businesses? Not many. And he was complaining about waste. And I said, well, how much waste is in your company? There's waste everywhere. The problem is trying to detect it, figure out how to deal with it. I mean, that's the issue. Some are better at doing that than others. So anyhow, I've said that there are 5 functions that the federal government should continue to do no matter what. You can see the first one is testing. The U.S. government mandates certain testing. I think they should continue to mandate certain testing across all 50 states. They do that now. 3rd grade, it doesn't matter where you are in the 50 states, you have to do a reading proficiency test. What's the problem with reading proficiency? All the states define it differently. But at least you have everybody having to take the test. So I believe that's important. FAFSA, very important for FAFSA. Every student. Last year, we left $118 million on the table because students did not complete FAFSAs. And yet the average college debt in the state of Ohio is something like $30,000. That's because students are securing debt for degrees that they don't need. We have 220,000 students in the state of Ohio. I'll say that one more time. 220,000 students in the state of Ohio who stopped out of college because they have debt. They have $750 million worth of debt. They said, I can't keep going. That's a problem. Part of that debt is because they made bad college choices, right? Some of them said, I want to go to UD. And excuse me, they shouldn't have gone to UD. They should have gone to Sinclair for 2 years and then gone to Wright State to get that engineering degree, and they would have gotten it at half the cost. So part of this is helping kids make better choices, but part of it also is having them complete FAFSAs. Again, we left $118 million on the table last year because we did not have kids complete FAFSAs. I think that's something the federal government should still do. Data collection across the 50 states, I think the federal government should continue to do that. Pell, That's students who are low income. The low income students get Pell Grants. That shouldn't be up to all 50 states to say, guess what, in our state we do this, and you move across the border and, oh, our state doesn't do that, our state does this. In a mobile society, it makes sense to have some things centralized. So you can see how we've kind of, with these, each of these, and IDEA has to do with disability legislation. That's 1975, very, very significant legislation that said that if you have disabilities, exceptionalities, you have to be educated. And it's made a huge difference. I have a niece who has Down syndrome. She's a barista at one of the coffee houses. Pre-1975, that would not happen. And it really has lost intellectual capital because we've now discovered these kids can do a lot of different jobs that are quite important to us and quite significant in terms of what we need to do as a society. All right, those are the 4 things that I captured. I'm going to do one more real quick, and then I'm going to talk for a second about baby bonds, and then I'm going to open it up for questions. I thought somebody would probably ask about AI. So let me just say a word about AI. AI is really changing the way teaching looks like. There are incredible software programs for teachers to use with AI. And you would not believe. Jan, who was an English teacher for how many years? Jan, many, still quite young, but many years she taught. If she had an objective, if she wanted to anchor that to state standards, she'd go in and she'd look at the objectives she had, then she'd try to find the state standard, then she'd try to find a lesson, then she might try to identify, here's what how I'm going to test the kids, right? I think I'm going to give them a practice quiz, and she might spend, a couple hours kind of getting all those dots connected. AI with software like Brisk, there are 2 or 3 of these, she could do that in about 5 minutes, all those things. Because she'd put in her objective, it would automatically show you the state standard. It would show you exactly a lesson plan that you could use, actually multiple lesson plans. It would kick out exam questions for you to use. It's remarkable if you've not seen what some of this software can do and some of what AI can do. It's simply remarkable. Now, that said, I'm a big supporter of the use of AI. I think, though, the key question with AI is going to be, can we continue to find ways to make sure that AI is not doing our thinking for us? That's the danger. The cognitive process is what is unique to the human experience and what is unique to us as humans. Cognitively processing information, taking facts, taking concepts, processing those, reflecting on those, that's what's important. Think about the difference between reading a book and going to so you read the whole book and you internalize it, or you go to Wikipedia or some other little site and you get this paragraph, here's what the book is about. You've not done any of the same kind of cognitive work. AI is like going to that Wikipedia site, it's doing the work, but it's really not doing the work for you. It really is artificial in terms of how it's giving you that information. What really is critical is the cognitive processing you do. So I think if we can continue to find ways to do that, my grandchildren, I'm sure you've had conversations with them. I have a granddaughter at Purdue right now, senior. I have another grandson at Indiana. I've asked them, do you use AI? They go, all the time. One's in construction engineering. She said, lots of times I can't figure out how to do something. I can't get access to the professor. I just go in and help me figure out how to do this. Now think about how many times some of us in this room were in our college classroom at 8 o'clock at night or 9 o'clock at night trying to figure something out. We'd try to, who's smarter than I am that might have figured this out, right? You don't have to do that anymore. These kids have immediate access to tutors. So AI is remarkable. I'll tell you one a quick AI story. About 8-9 months ago, a friend of mine, Brian Stewart, quite an interesting young man. Some of you might know Brian. Brian was going to do, he had gotten selected to do a parachute jump with the Army Rangers. Big deal. So the Army Rangers said, you can jump with us up in Cleveland. And he thought that was exciting, so he was going to do it. And around the office, he shared with us, I'm going to jump with the Army Rangers. And about 3 days before he got ready to jump, he started to get cold feet. It's like, it's late at night. His wife has a very responsible job. So Brian, and my apologies to Brian if he ever watches this for sharing this, but I don't think Brian would mind at all. But Brian went on AI, and he told AI his concern. He said, AI, I'm worried that I might get killed when I jump. AI popped back, what, in like 2 seconds, right? ChatGPT, I think he used ChatGPT at that time. Probably doesn't use that now. ChatGPT said, no one has died from a parachute jump with the Army Rangers since like 1987. And the cause of that was X, Y, and Z, and the Army Rangers have now corrected that problem. He felt better. So he thanked ChatGPT. He literally said, I went in, he showed me the email, I saw it, or the exchange. He thanked them for the solace that they provided. And he got a response back. Now his thanks was about his grandfather who had jumped, was a parachuter and had jumped at Normandy. And he thought he was doing this to honor his grandfather. And so he told that to ChatGPT. ChatGPT responded back and said, what a way to honor your grandfather. It was like having an exchange with a therapist. And he went to sleep. He said, I felt better. Felt better. Just saying, I think there are lots of things you'll begin to see with AI that to this point, not evident. The last thing I have is something I'm working on right now. It's baby bonds. This is not my idea, so I've totally stolen this idea. But it's to give every child, every Medicaid baby, every foster child, to create a trust for every one of them. For the children born in poverty in the state of Ohio, you create a trust for them. At the age of 18, that trust would be worth about $20,000. The child could then use that trust, those trust funds, to either go to college, buy a house, or start a business in the state. They can't move out. They can only use the dollars if they stay in the state. 13 states are now doing this. You can almost guess which states are doing it, right? You know what I mean? See, the states, actually, here's the interesting, it's blue and red states. So next Wednesday, I'm meeting just with some Republican leaders because I've now found some red states that are doing exactly the same thing. They're trying to protect their intellectual capital, keep young people in their state. Because of the birth dearth, what's happening, we've got fewer and fewer kids. And so to try to protect what they have, they're trying to find ways to keep those student populations in their state. So baby bonds is the idea. It's an investment in our young people. We have Trump accounts. You all know what Trump accounts are, don't you? Every child born in the United States, every baby born in the United States, through the big, beautiful bill, is now able to get, there's a $1,000 that goes into the equivalent of a 529 account for that child. And the parents can then invest. So they can put money in there for that child, just like a 529 account. I have 529 accounts for every one of my grandchildren. That is incredibly, good for me as a middle-class adult. It's not so good if I'm low income. So baby bonds represent a way of trying to deal with the needs of those who are low income. But let me start through these. The first one is comment on the impact of career academies in terms of college enrollment. I don't know if you're aware of this. Almost all of us in this room, I'm going to guess, went to a comprehensive high school. I went to a comprehensive high school. Akron has now completely eliminated all their comprehensive high schools. They're all career academies. You don't go, there are no comprehensive high schools there. And I just read, there's one city in the state of Ohio, one of the biggest cities. There are 21 what they call urban centers, 21 of those. Akron's the only one where the performance of their students for the population they serve is at or above all the others that are in the state. So it's high performing. So there's been a lot of effort to do that, because by having that focus early on in the state of, now in Montgomery County, we are administering to almost all the 7th and 8th graders U Science. YOU Science, U Science. It measures interest and aptitude. So I can now tell you, if you take me to this school and you show me their 7th and 8th graders, I can say this is the percentage of kids who have an interest in and an aptitude for engineering. Here's the percentage of kids who have an interest in and an aptitude for medicine. Are we trying to make them a surgeon? No. What we're saying is, this is a student whose interests and aptitudes match the health area or match the engineering area. Now, where this really comes in helpful is we had the county sheriff about, 2 months ago said, I wish we knew which kids were interested in being a part of the police academy. We can tell you that. Now, if we put them through a specialized training in high school, they are really on they're tracking to being able to now pursue that as a career. Are we trying to make every one of them a policeman? No. We're trying to make that high school experience more purposeful. Lots of kids drop out because they can't figure out, why should I have to solve for the unknown? Why in the world does anyone have to do that? Makes more sense if you know what? Solving for the unknown becomes important if you're going into this career, because let me show you how that skill is important for success in that career. That's what Akron has started to do with considerable success. A number of other cities now in the state of Ohio are getting ready to do what? Get rid of their comprehensive high schools and have just career academies for the students. And we'll see how this kind of evolves, but I think it's really going to impact enrollment. The next one was, what was Dayton's intellectual capital versus Detroit? Who wrote this? Is that Dave? Dave, Dayton in Montgomery County has about 40% with 2- and 4-year degrees. I don't know what Detroit's is, but the nice thing is the Lumina Foundation, if you go to lumina.org, they list the amount of intellectual capital for every county in the United States. And so tomorrow, I will go in, I'll look up Detroit, and I will be able to tell you exactly what our county is and what their county is. So I'll set that one aside and I'll send that to David. Let's see. I'd like to hear your thoughts on College Credit Plus. I'm a huge believer in College Credit Plus. College Credit Plus is taking a college course while you're in high school. Now, there's a group of students called HALO students. HALO is high achieving, HALO, low income. Okay, low income, HALO students. Now, it's interesting because the students who do the best, the high achieving, low income students who outperform their peers, are those who are in high schools where they offer a lot of College Credit Plus courses, a lot of advanced placement courses. There are 3 really high-performing schools in the state of Ohio that outperform their peers in dramatic ways, that serve low-income students who achieve very high. DECA is one of those schools. DECA is one of those schools. Father Gene is old enough. I mean, Father Gene knows we had a journey with getting that school started. You know, it was not like everybody goes, is that a great idea to bring a bunch of black kids on campus? You know, right? I mean, but what do? They offer college classes to students at the high school. One of the other schools, at the Akron Early College, every one of their students graduates, their high school students graduates with a 2-year college degree and their high school diploma. Every one of them. So that you really are beginning to see this. And they're hoping that it doesn't shorten the college attendance of students. They still hope that student with that 2-year degree goes to a 4-year degree program. But now they can double major. I'm going to major in X and Y. Or I'm going to get this plus my master's degree, or I'm going to start tracking toward my PA. So they don't think it makes much of a difference in terms of how long the student takes in college. They just walk out of college with more intellectual capital, which in an AI environment is going to be important. The better educated I am, the better trained I am, the more likely I am to survive whatever happens around me. AI is going to make everyone's life interesting. You know, some populations, it really is going to make it interesting for people with a lot of different from a lot of different professions. So that's College Credit Plus. By the way, there's no cost to the student for that class unless they fail. If they fail the class, they have to pay for it. And by the way, we now know if a student takes that College Credit Plus course at the high school and they get an A, they have learned just as much as a student who took the same course at the university and got an A. So we've done some nice studies on this. There's no difference they don't water this course down. Some very good research on that. That's College Credit Plus. I've had teachers complain about how much time it's taking to prepare and taking tests. No doubt about it. One of the things, I think we over-tested kids. I think right now we're trying to figure out what's the right level of testing for the students to take. It's like anything else. For a long time, we didn't give any tests to figure out what people knew. Then we gave too many tests. So what's that called? The Aristotelian mean? Who are my philosophers? We needed Ray around here right now. Yeah, Ray would know. The Aristotelian mean, what's that midpoint to be able to really know how much testing is appropriate? But I'm convinced that a certain amount of testing is absolutely necessary. Let's see. It is not, the Catholic schools the Catholic schools have to test any student who has a voucher. So if I'm at CJ, I'm a voucher student, I have to take the same tests. But CJ, now, this I'm not sure of. I was on the CJ board for years, and I knew all this stuff. Now I'm not. CJ was actually looking at making all their students take the tests. I don't know, somebody'd have to tell me.
A lot of the elementaries, if a good majority took the test,
they just are all taking it, yeah. There for a while, they were just testing the voucher kids. I think now the critical mass of voucher kids is such they just are testing everybody. Why is the Ohio General Assembly opposed to accountability for private schools? You'd have to ask the Ohio General Assembly that question. Here's what I can say to you. If you talk to them privately, members of the General Assembly, they will tell you there is accountability and you can get information about the performance of the private schools in the state. So there is accountability. And to their credit, Ohio is one of the states that's ramped up their accountability protocols. They have clearly done that. I still don't think they are where they should be, and I still don't believe they should be giving vouchers to kids who are already making the choice to go to it. If I've made my choice to go to a Catholic school, my family income's $180,000. That's a choice you make. I don't think I, as a taxpayer, should be subsidizing your sending that child to the Catholic school. That's me. That's just the way I feel. I think there's a bit of an attack on the public schools right now, And I believe without strong public schools, our state is in trouble. You've got to have strong public schools. Otherwise, if you keep privatizing it, you're going to end up in the public schools with the kids who are the most difficult to educate. Who are the kids who are the most difficult to educate? I know for a fact, and I'm glad to be recorded on this, I know for a fact that many private schools, you walk in with a child with a certain set of exceptionalities, they will find a way for that child to get back to the public school. They just can't educate the child. So, costs a lot of money to educate some kids, a lot of money, because of the kind of exceptionalities that child is dealing with. Why aren't kids choosing to go to college? They're not sure they can figure out the return on investment. So for years, you could look at these graphs that show if you graduate from college, your lifetime income is expected to be $2.9 million. If you graduate with some college, it's going to be $2.1 million. If you graduate with high school, it's going to be $1.6 million. You know what I'm saying? They'd show a college education pays dividends. Now, I was talking to a woman at a foundation. This is a foundation in Cleveland. I was talking to her the other day, and she said, I am still paying. She's my daughter's age. I'm still paying on my college loans. She's 40 years old. Or I'm guessing she's in that 40, 41, 42. Yes?
Wouldn't you also say that not all kids are made to go to college?
And that, I think, is the advantage of the human capital approach, because now that child, and the academy approach, because now you're really saying to that child, what is it that interests you? Where are your skills? So that you can make a good living. And by the way, you can make a good living in HVAC. You can make a good living as an electrician. You can make a good living as a plumber. You can make a good living doing all sorts of things. As long as you have a skill set that I am willing to pay for you to exhibit at my house or my place of where I work. Do you have some sort of specialized skill? Do you have a work ethic? Can you show up to work every day?
Yeah.
Are you drug-free? And do you have some sort of specialized skill that I'm willing to pay for? But AI is going to, I just had a conversation with an attorney. AI is going to change the legal world. It's going to change lots and lots of things. And some of those kids who decided not to go to college are saying, plumbing, there's no AI for trying to figure out how to, right? There's no AI that's going to go down and fix my furnace. This one, no, not all students. This one is, do all students have to fill out a FAFSA? I'm trying to get Representative Tom Young. He represents this area. I'm trying to get him and other legislators to mandate FAFSA as a graduation requirement. I want the state of Ohio to say, you cannot graduate from high school if you've not completed a FAFSA. A bunch of states have done that. A bunch of red states have done it. A bunch of states that outperform us have done it. And by the way, I'd put an opt-out provision. So if a parent said, I don't want my child to complete it, I'd let them opt out. But let me tell you, about 8 or 9 years ago, when we were first on this FAFSA journey, I was over in West Carrollton at the high school. We were giving all the kids free pizza and tokens and whatever else we could conjure up. We were giving them if they would complete a FAFSA. And so I was over there. The counselor was over there helping the kids fill out the FAFSA. They gave the kids were allowed to use their cell phones to call their parents to complete it. So here we got all these kids. One girl was sitting there and she wasn't doing it. Counselor walked over to me and she said, you see that girl right there? I said, yeah. She said, you know what's sad about that? Her mom has told her she cannot go to college and she's going to graduate about 8th or 9th in her high school class. And she told her she can't go to college because they can't afford it. And I said, does she know that she could go to Sinclair for free right? She could go to Sinclair. I said, does she know that? Does the parent know she can go to Sinclair for free? It won't cost her anything. Is she Pell eligible? Yeah, then she can go. In fact, I said, she'll make money. Won't she, David?
Absolutely.
She will make money. I lost that battle. Does recruitment of high school football players, this is a good question. Does recruitment of high school football players from district to district have anything to do with vouchers? That is a good question. Who wrote that question? Good question. We need, that's a research question. I don't know the answer to it. That's a good question to research. Give a short history of the Dayton School, Larry Connors, the Greater Dayton School. Larry Connors wanted to create the Greater Dayton School. I actually opposed it because I felt like Dayton didn't need to have another group of kids skimmed off from the student population. Larry believed strongly in wanting to create a very high quality school. I don't feel comfortable giving you all the details. I can just share that over time, I did support the Greater Dayton School, and I've been down there. It's quite an interesting place. They have exercise facilities for the kids. They have mental health support for the kids. They have all sorts of support. The nutrition, you eat meals family style there with the kids. I did that with a bunch of third graders. Food was placed in the middle of the table. Everybody passed it around. There were 2 adults, myself and one other man. As the food was being passed around and they took it, that other adult kept correcting the students. Teaching them how to eat properly. How many of you ever went to DECA when Judy Hennessy was there? Who went to, yeah. I always tell, Judy was amazing at DECA because I'd walk in with a guest. I'd say, Judy, I've got this guest. Can they look at the school? Judy'd walk around. Susan, Dick, correct me. She'd walk you around and she'd pick a student randomly, right? And she'd say, come up here, meet Dr. Lasley. And the student would put their hand out and shake my hand and say, let's do this one more time. Shake Dr. Lasley's hand. I'd shake. She'd say, this time, look at Dr. She'd actually put, look at Dr. Lasley, shake his hand. And the student would go, hello, doctor. Much better. Okay, now continue. She'd keep correcting the student the whole time. And I always thought, man, one of these kids is going to turn around and just punch her. Those kids, they loved it, didn't they? They loved it. They loved her because they knew what she was trying to do was to prepare them for the world. Little fun story. I'll tell you a little fun story. We're trying to do a program with The Ohio State University through DECA. And it was not going well. So I was on the phone with the vice president from Ohio State, a couple people from DECA, and we were trying to get Ohio State to do this program, which they had done for several years, and then they stopped. We were trying to get them to redo it again. We're in it. It's not going well. We got 2 or 3 people. We got like the vice president, the person under the vice president, the person to person. You know what I'm saying? And the vice president is not saying much, but everybody else is talking. And finally, the vice president says, tell me a bit more about DECA. And so the one person who reports to her, she said, oh, DECA is remarkable. She said, some of our best students have come here. And she mentioned a young man's name. And the vice president said, what was his name? He's a DECA grad? And she said, yeah, it's X. And she gave the name again. The vice president said, oh my gosh, that's my stockbroker. Larry Connor at the Greater Dayton School, I think, is really, it's trying with a small group of students to create an opportunity for them. And it's really quite a remarkable place. It's going to be grades K through 8, and then the students, when they go to high school, will go to DECA, we'll go to Carroll, we'll go to CJ, we'll go to Stebbins. You see what, they'll be able to go to any of those schools when they get to high school. Busing, that was your question, busing. Busing in Dayton occurred because, you remember how I talked about the 3 waves of vouchers? It was determined back in the mid-60s that Dayton had a segregated system. They had to find a way to integrate it. If you go to Roosevelt High School and you look at pictures of Roosevelt High School in 1960, it looks white students, black students. I mean, it looks like a typical community. You look at Roosevelt High School in 1973, what's it look like? It's all black students. So the courts ruled that they had to desegregate, and busing was the solution. They came up with a couple. They were going to have magnet schools. They tried to have these magnet schools where kids could, oh, I'll go to that school. Kind of a career academy concept, actually. Or we'll bus you to that school. Or we'll find some other way for you to get to the school you need to be to attend. But what happened was most of the white families moved out of the city. I might add some black families moved out of the city. It left a population there with a greater set of educational needs. That busing decision stood until about 2004, when Judge Wright, when the district asked for relief from the busing mandate of the courts. Now, they wrote a plan to get relief from the mandate of the courts, took it to Judge Rice, and he turned it down. He said, come up with a better plan, and you have till next Wednesday to get me the plan. The Dayton Public Schools hired me and one other guy to rewrite the plan. It's the only time in my adult life I pulled an all-nighter. I literally sat at the offices all night long with this other person, and we rewrote their plan, and then went with the president of Central State. He was kind of the overseeing. The 3 of us went to meet with Judge Rice, and Judge Rice released the district from the mandate. So that no longer is in effect. Teacher shortage. I'm against lowering the requirements for people to be teachers. I think the right thing is to figure out how to further incentivize the teaching profession. What can you do to make teaching more attractive? You know, it's interesting, in the countries that outperform us, the teachers actually teach less time. Japan, for example, the teachers teach fewer hours than our teachers do. When, I've never asked Carol this question, but if I ask her to give her day, do you remember what time you started school on a typical day? What time did you start? When you started? Well, let's say, yeah, give me a time. 8:45. What time would the kids get there? The kids would get there at 8:45. You might get, yeah. 7:30, 8:45, the kids get there. What time did the kids leave? 3. From 8:45 to 3, how much break time did you have? An hour in that noonish. So you taught about 5 hours and 15 minutes or something like that to kids. Yeah. You look in Japan, you look at the Japanese schools, a lot of the schools that outperform us, they have shorter years, shorter days, a common curriculum that everybody has to learn, regardless of where you are in the country. But the teachers have more planning time and more time, just emotional debrief time. They're not with kids. American teachers, when they go to school, they basically are with kids. There's not a lot of time when the teachers are separate from kids. So I think we've got to figure out, to address the teacher shortage issue, we really have to figure out how do we make it so that teachers really are incentivized to be in the classroom. You know, one of the things I liked about not being a teacher when I was no longer in the classroom was that if I didn't quite feel well, I could still go to work. But as a teacher, if I didn't quite feel well, or if I decide to stay home. I mean, when I no longer had a classroom, I didn't go, oh my gosh, if I don't go to work today, I've got to write lesson plans for somebody to do everything I'm going to do. So it's very, very different. There's a lot of demands on teachers that are making it, not a desirable profession. There's also a recent study that shows their salaries have stayed far behind those of similar professions. So it's also a compensation issue. So I don't know how we're going to deal with that, but clearly I think it's going to be an issue in the years to come. Are there any other questions that you have?
I just have one comment to follow up on what you're saying, is the teachers also have to deal with these kids and the parents.
Kids and the parents, and if my daughter were here, something I never had to deal with, my daughter's a teacher in Centerville. When I taught, my first years were pre-IDEA legislation, pre-1975. I didn't have kids with the kind of exceptionalities that you have in the classroom now. And now you have kids with some very serious and significant issues in classrooms that teachers have to deal with. So it really is a very demanding and emotional experience to be a teacher. I think we'll have to, I think we will, but I think we'll have to address that. Dick.
Tom, vouchers are at a critical stage again. What could be done to fix the vouchers short of all or none? So we've also created a dependency on the vouchers. My humble opinion is that Catholic schools would cease to be in with the absence of vouchers. Mm-hmm. There's such a high percentage at each school where the kids have vouchers. So that would be draconian from the community standpoint, maybe not from the quality of schools, I don't know. Pretty good schools, high schools are excellent. I don't want to see them go away. Is there a way to fix vouchers?
Yes. So my fix is as follows. You have accountability protocols that are the same for private and Catholic schools. Exactly the same. You've got the same protocols. Number two, the voucher can only be used by a student if you're taking that voucher, whatever your most proximate public school is, you can only take it to a school that outperforms that school. So if I'm here, I've got to find a school that outperforms that school. If I'm a taxpayer, I'm going to give you money. I don't want to give you money to go to a school that's not as good as the one that's right next door to you. So that's the second thing. And then third thing is the school district only has to bus a kid to if the kid is attending a school that outperforms the proximate public school. So I don't have to, if you decide I want to send my kid to that school, but that's a poor performing private school, right now you've got to bus that kid to that school. You got to pay for that kid to go to a school that's worse than the one that's right next door to him. My argument is you would only pay to send that kid to a school that outperforms the one that's local. And the Catholic schools would not be in it.
Those three provisions be worked into legislation short of
They would be if legislators wanted that kind of stuff. That's not what they want. They would immediately get pushback. Immediately. The private school people would go, no. No, I mean, they just would not have. The charter school people, especially charter schools, I mean, even less than the private schools, we've got a lot of very poor performing charter schools. You got to bust the kids to those. Here's my school. It's not bad, but the parent says, Aunt Susie lives over there, so I want to bus my kid over there, even though that's not a good school, but Aunt Susie lives right next to it, so she can babysit after school. I got to now transport you over there so that the kid can go over to Aunt Susie. I mean, it's a crazy system we've created. Until we really get the accountability piece in place, the voucher thing, and people are really convinced, Right now, we have vouchers being used not to really try to create high-quality educational experiences for all kids. It's a system that is operating to the best interest of adults. I need to keep my Catholic schools open, so we've got to have vouchers. I've got to keep this school open, so we have to have vouchers. Now, I believe that if we had a good accountability system, the Catholic schools are still going to be fine. I don't think there's a threat there. But trust me, if you really put your thumb on the accountability scale, you would get a boatload of pushback on that.
So that a Centerville student probably couldn't go to Incarnation,
Pardon?
probably couldn't go to Incarnation.
May not be able to go to, may not have me paying for them to go to Incarnation. Now, understand, that's what's happening right now. That parent's at Incarnation and I'm giving money to that parent to send them to Incarnation. I have no trouble with the parent saying, I want my child to go to Incarnation. Absolutely understandable. I have a problem with me saying, now let me give you money so that they can go to Incarnation, when there's a good school right over here.
Tom, would you also put some sort of a limitation on income in terms of who could actually use the voucher?
The original Zellman decision was one that was really driven by, we've got to find ways for a kid who's in a terrible public school, we've got to find a way for that child to explore a more positive educational option. I am 100% for that. Give the kid a voucher. I'm for that. That's not where we are now. Where we are now is, who wants a voucher? Raise your hand if you want a voucher. And here it is. Oh, you make $250,000? You are still, if you're in Florida, forget the income. Everybody, who wants a voucher? You see, and the loser in that is the public schools. The loser in that is the public schools, because the public schools, once that Catholic school, once that private school, once that charter school says, you're too difficult to educate, we're going to find a way to get you back out the door. Where does that kid go? The public school. Costs the public school $70,000 to educate, maybe even up to $100,000 to educate some kids. That charter school, that private school, that Catholic school cannot afford to do it. They move that child out. Look, that's been happening for years, but it's why we need a good, strong public school. That's exactly the reason we need that. Yeah.
Busing, it's something that confuses me horribly. Greater Dayton RTA and Dayton City Schools and all that craziness. It might not be a relevant question, but I thought I'd ask.
Well, I think putting high school kids on RTA buses is not a good idea. I think that's why you have yellow buses. You don't take 15-year-olds and mix them with 50-year-olds on the way to school.
I think they're not funding it, or they're not actively supporting it. I don't know what's going on, but that's why it's going to RTA.
Well, some of it was a funding decision. That was part of it because the cost was significant. Some of it was because of the difficulties they were having between the student population and the adult population that was riding the buses. Some of it was because at the hub they were having all sorts of problems at the hub. But the point is, when I went to high school, when you went to high school, I rode a yellow bus. I think that's what the DPS kids ought to be doing.
I got it, thanks.
Any final question?
What's going to happen to the public schools?
I think the public schools I think they're going to have to be more innovative than they've been. Certain public schools are going to be fine. The Oakwoods are going to be fine. Yeah, because they're the real schools that I'm worried about are the schools that serve large numbers of very poor kids with a host of social problems. Larry Connor's school, notice he's educating DPS kids. They have to be a Dayton Public School kid that's now coming to the Greater Dayton School. But what's Larry doing? He's making sure they have meals. He's making sure they have mental health supports. He's making sure they exercise properly. He's making sure they have doctors available to work with them. If you go down to that school, there's sections of that school that are nothing but for health and welfare professionals who are there to support the kids. Larry, in that regard, I think Larry's doing a remarkable job of really trying to support the needs of the kids. But it's expensive and complicated. Well, thank you very much. I really appreciate it.